Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Need for Speed Unbound. So there's a reason I've probably not spoken about this game as much as I originally planned to, and I'll kind of discuss that a little bit later on in the video. However, today we're here to talk about the first proper post-launch update for Need for Speed Unbound. So I believe just over a month ago we got a tweet from the official Need for Speed Twitter basically saying a kind of update was coming in January, and it'd obviously feature a bunch of kind of changes and new things to the game. However, yeah, it turns out it does feature changes, but it features literally nothing really else. There's no content, there's no kind of expansion to the multiplayer and such. In fact, it was a very lackluster update, and I'd say overall it was probably an absolute disaster. And there's also just a lot of talk around the community in general really saying that this update is just not what the game needed. And to be quite honest, I fully agree with everyone. I was kind of expecting at least something to come in January, and that kind of stems back to the fact that in total honesty, Need for Speed Unbound really isn't that kind of content rich. In fact, the single player probably will only last you a few days at most, maybe let's say a week tops, before you'll probably dive into the multiplayer, which is kind of separate to the single player, but then you'll kind of realize it's very shallow. So this game was kind of really at its peak for a couple of weeks maximum before kind of just fading away, which is an actual shame because gameplay wise this Need for Speed was absolutely solid. Whether you didn't like all the effects or anything like that, just the way the game played overall was very good. In fact, I found it to be one of the better Need for Speeds in a long time. In all honesty, it was an improvement gameplay wise over kind of 2015 Payback and Heat, but in terms of the content there just wasn't much keeping you there after you've done the single player and maybe dived into the multiplayer for a little bit. And obviously, you know, gamers have a pretty short attention span these days. The constant need for content is always really there. It's completely different from the way it used to be. You know, gaming as a whole is a completely different landscape. And if you're not updating your game well enough or as frequent enough, you can guarantee your audience will just walk away and find another game that is similar and exactly doing what you've not been doing. And I feel like that's really where the problem is for Need for Speed Unbound. Like I said, because it's quite shallow in terms of its content, it really needed something fresh to maybe bring those day one players back that might have done everything and kind of moved along. So let's talk about what actually came with this update, and the main real changes actually came in the form of the Volkswagen Golf GTI, the 1976 version, the old, I believe it's the Mark 1 in game. That got a few changes, mainly just kind of nerfing it, and there was also changes to the Koenigsegg Regera. Both were pretty OP, and in all honesty, the changes don't really bother me. In all honesty, I'm not really bothered about using OP cars online. I'll just use what I find's fun, but I'm guessing users of those cars, or regular users of those cars, will probably be a little bit frustrated. However, it does realistically make them a bit more in line with the rest of the cars in the game. And this is kind of where my first complaint comes in about this update. Those two cars got patched, and whilst yes, they was overpowered, it wasn't anything too ridiculous. There is still the whole situation around the 488 Pista that is still in the game and basically completely broken and didn't even get a look in within this update. If you didn't know, you can essentially take it down to a B spec and run it up against other B class cars. Obviously B class cars being the slowest class of cars in the game, which basically means you're unbeatable for that entire lobby. It's absolutely ridiculous, and in all honesty, if you're trying to go through and unlock all the cars for multiplayers, there's a lot of challenges where you have to race certain B class cars, maybe certain manufacturers and stuff, to be able to unlock maybe another different car in that manufacturer lineup. And essentially you can guarantee there'll always be a bunch in the 488 Pista who will essentially just completely destroy you, and it is not a fun experience, even in the slightest. In fact, it really puts you in the situation where if you want to do well in B class, if you can't beat them, you essentially have to join them. And the fact that this didn't get patched is just an absolute joke, because it really does plague those B lobbies. Some other changes were changes to the VoIP for PS5 users, which is essentially just voice chat. I never really had that problem, but then again, I was mainly only in party chat when playing this game. There's also the save game error / progress reset been kind of, patched out, should I say. So it says, added a warning message when the game fails to autosave correctly to reduce potential loss of progress. Now this is essentially just to kind of, put in a warning in there if the game's failed to just do what it realistically should be. There's also a PC minimum specs warning, so it's added a warning message when the game detects a below min spec configuration. So essentially, if your PC ain't good enough, it's gonna now basically throw it in your face and warn you. So there's also another change. It just says stability, multiple stability improvements to reduce potential for game crashes, and that's your lot. There's also a little bit at the bottom, and this is where it kind of annoyed a lot of people. It says, as mentioned in December 2022, which is what I originally kind of, spoke about at the beginning of this video, we will be delivering a series of free content updates that will include new features, experiences, content drops, and more. We are currently working hard on delivering our first content update to Lakeshore, and are looking forward to sharing more details with you in March. And for me, and what seems like a lot of other people that play this game, that is where the problem lies. What seemed like, what was coming in January has now been pushed back to March, and we all kind of feel a bit led astray. And not just that, it just feels like this game will not really have the audience there to come back to in March. Like I said, Need for Speed Unbound, from a gameplay and kind of the way it looks and stuff perspective, is just absolutely fantastic. In fact, it's leaps and bounds ahead of anything that we've had recently from this franchise, and that is in my honest opinion. I really like the way this game was. However, the longevity, it's just not there. The fact that the multiplayer is so bare bones, who's really going to want to come back in March? Maybe they'll kind of come back for maybe only a few hours to a couple of days, but you can guarantee they're more than likely just going to turn their back and disappear once again, if they haven't already gotten rid of the game at that point. And I feel that's always been the problem for Need for Speed, in terms of its post-launch content, especially for Heat. I mean, after what happened to that game with people, even years after its release, were begging for new content and it just didn't get the support, can probably see the same happening to Need for Speed Unbound, which is just extremely unfortunate. If Need for Speed as a franchise wants to keep up with other racing games that, get updated sometimes weekly, maybe monthly, then it needs to just kind of get on track with those. It needs to follow the same format, or else there just won't be the audience there when they keep dropping these updates. So realistically, can I see why a lot of people are unhappy about this update? Yes, and that includes myself. I cannot sit there and say I'm extremely happy with this update, because truth be told, I'm not. I was just expecting a bit more, and maybe even a patch for that 488, which is essentially just completely plaguing B-Class. So not only do we have, a slight rebalance in some of the cars, the kind of main problem car that's left in the game is still there and not even being kind of looked into, and you can probably bet that isn't going to get looked into until March now, if that's when they kind of next expecting to update this game. Not only that, it feels like another rinse and repeat situation of Need for Speed Heat, where the post-launch support just isn't there. It feels like on one hand it's going to be supported, but on the other, is it just going to be kind of a bunch of quality of life updates that don't really do that much? And like I kind of mentioned, they can promise content drops and all that from March onwards, but will they really be the player base for this game at that point? I honestly don't really know. I feel like the numbers or the kind of coverage on this game in general has completely dwindled, especially since the first couple of weeks of release, and I don't really see anything changing that, whether they add content or not. So there we have it. I can see this whole debacle around Need for Speed Unbound, and whilst it feels like another rinse and repeat situation, and I fully agree with everyone that this update is just a massive disaster and a disappointment. That's going to be it from me. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn the notifications on so you don't miss an upload from me. I upload racing game content, news and all that each and every day for your viewing pleasure. Don't forget to check out my Twitter and my Discord in the description down below, as well as my donation link, and I'll also have my sponsors in there, the Controller People and Poggers, who provide the best energy drink and sleep formula on the market. I'll see you all in the next one. Have a great day, guys. Peace.